indeed, Margaret, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. In the session today, we're talking about technology and sustainability, and really just trying to have some thought-provoking, time going through how it matches together, and ultimately whether it is a great match or whether there is an illusion there. And hopefully we're not necessarily going to try and answer anything significant within that, but just certainly cover around the subject. Okay, so we have three presenters today: Darren, Martin, and myself. And Darren, do you want to start off? You're going to do a very quick intro.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Margaret, and everybody that's taken the time out to join us this afternoon. I think we're looking at it from a number of different perspectives, but just to sort of give you a very brief insight into my sort of relevance here. My background in the commercial world certainly has been wholly in the IT sector. So I started back in the late 70s then, but late 90s in the corporate world, large American software companies back then, and then that sort of developed I started a business with a couple of friends back in the early 2000s, which is all about mobile. Started developing mobile apps before apps were a thing. Grew that, and that was eventually acquired by a much larger managed services business. And I ended up, I was the MD of the business at the time. I ended up taking on the MD role of a regional internet service provider based in Fareham, actually, and that needed turning around. And so I ended up spending 6 years of my time in that business, working in there. So I've got a sense of, enterprise software computing, app development, networking, the whole range of sort of IT I've come across. And not being a technical specialist, it's often been a slight stretch, if you like. And that's why I qualified as a coach. I qualified as a coach during my last role, and used that to help develop the team and develop the business, and ended up 8 years ago leaving when the whole business got sold to private equity to do that full time. And the reason I'm here today is because the way that's evolved is that I've increasingly I work with tech companies, but the question I often get is, we know there's a sort of, if you like, an existential threat out there, but what can we do? And so the reason I'm here today is to kind of answer that question in a brief way, in terms of, well, what can we do from a sort of personal development, leadership development perspective. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about that shortly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Darren. Martin.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Martin. I am a regional director for the Southwest for Freeman Clark. We provide fractional CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs for mid-sized companies who are either not large enough to afford or want a full-time technology leader, or who just want to benefit from some additional technology leadership on a fractional basis. Before I did this role, I started and ran a 200-person software engineering consultancy based in Sunderland. And I left that business in 2023 because I was starting to feel like we were spending a lot of time helping large organizations like banks make more money and not enough time making the world better. So I'm sort of on a journey. I left to embark on the journey of doing something that was more focused on sustainability and decarbonisation. I'm still on that journey, and hence being here today.
Fabulous. Thank you, Martin. And then lastly, and definitely least compared to these two formidable gentlemen, is myself. So my background is I spent much of my career in the telecoms reseller channel, and then I spent a decade or 12 years actually running a systems integrator based in the south of the UK. And then moved away from that, where we did a merger with another organisation in about 2017, and then finally sold out that business in 2021. And then so for the last few years, I've been working as an independent consultant, and my specialism is in sustainable IT. Hence, I'm a member of the BCS Green IT Group, and a number of other groups as well. So that's my brief background. So just going through what we're going to cover today. So we're going to be exploring the thoughts and ideas about sustainability from a number of different areas and perspectives. So firstly, we're going to be talking about AI and sustainability, which will be Martin. Then we're going to be talking about the sustainability shift from within, which is Darren's section. And then the third section is myself, and I'm going to be going from idea to action. So we'll cover each of those first. But the first one is AI and sustainability. Martin, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. As part of my role, I look after business development for the Southwest region for Freeman Clark, but I also am a CTO for a handful of clients in this area as well. And one of the key topics that is coming up more and more, and is actively an active topic for all the people I work with, is AI. And so, as someone who's interested in sustainability, I've wrestled a bit with the pros and cons from a sustainability perspective of doing AI, and I thought it would just be worth spinning through my thoughts, current thoughts and thesis on how people who are interested in sustainability should think about AI. So, Peter, would you just nudge the slide forward one? Thanks. I think it's obvious to everyone on this call that AI has arrived and is not going anywhere. So the graph on the right that you probably can't read the numbers on is just from a McKinsey report that was released in March, which shows that the percentage of companies, and they're aiming at larger businesses, but I think it applies directionally across the all companies. It is the percentage of companies who have implemented at least one one use case using AI, and it's up to 78% now as of the end of 2024, beginning of 25. And so, and you can see the direction of travel on that graph, and in particular, you can see the use of Gen AI. So the light blue line on the right-hand side is the use of Gen AI that's gone from almost nothing to 70-odd% very rapidly since 2023. And so companies, it's super attractive. I like the potential and possibilities that Gen AI gives to clients that I work with. Companies are using it. I find the best uses so far are the ones where you can ingest large volumes of data and get insights that you can't easily get using more traditional kind of BI tools. Streamlining operations. So I talk about turning the handle. So there are lots of teams where essentially the role of the team is to just keep doing the same thing again and again, very reliably. AI is brilliant. Gen AI is brilliant at providing the kind of logic behind automation that lets you reduce the friction and make that turning the handle just better and more efficient. Improving customer experiences. I've got a couple of clients I'm working with now where we have deployed things either on their website or in their product to customers, which is tailored by and managed and updated by generative AI. So taking in a range of context information and providing something that's very specific to a customer and making that experience better. And finally, optimizing, so scenario analysis, so looking at the kind of traveling salesman type algorithm of just what's the most efficient way of going from A to B, or from using the resources I've got. We're finding that Gen AI has increasingly got a role to play in that. And not to mention, it's kind of, I think lots of people that I know now are using either ChatGPT or Gemini or another Grok or any of the major AI chat platforms, just to help them do their job. So asking questions, what's the best way of dealing with this, or can you help me write this letter, or can you give me advice on this scenario, or can you do a better web search than Google can? And it's just becoming more and more prolific and far easier to engage with. And so, Peter, if you just nudge the slide forward, occasionally I pause for thought and think, well, this is all great, but AI, we hear, and I'm sure everyone's heard some versions of these sound bites, so I'll just provide a couple. AI is significantly more energy intensive than the kind of technology we're used to using. So the average query on ChatGPT takes 10 times more energy to deliver an answer than a Google query. And if you think about your average conversation with ChatGPT is probably, rather than just being a single query where you scroll through the answers and say, okay, great, I've got it, you're having 2, 3, 4, 5 back and forth sort of turns with that chatbot to then give you the answer. So you've got a significantly higher energy use just from using the chat end of generative AI, not to mention if you're connecting up APIs and doing high scale automation using generative AI, the energy would be even more significant. Another stat for you is a million tokens. So a token is a word or a part of a word in the data that you feed to AI or the data you get out of a generative AI model. So roughly speaking, that costs about £1, depending on which model you're using, it costs you about £1 to process 1 million tokens. The energy use is the equivalent of the fuel required to drive an average family-sized car 20 miles. So if you're doing, for example, in a law firm, ingesting legal documents and pumping them out to the lawyers in your law firm, you're doing the equivalent of hundreds of miles of travel in terms of energy consumption. And then another soundbite for you is the generating an image, a single image generated using AI costs about the same amount of energy as charging your smartphone from empty to full. And so, there's a significant energy amounts, and you might think, as somebody who cares about sustainability, maybe you should just be a bit careful, or perhaps maybe not jump into IT, or maybe not jump into AI. I don't think we're already all jumped into IT, but not jump into AI as quickly, and perhaps moderate use and maybe not be so prolific with the use of AI. Peter, if you nudge the slide forward, another one. I think the challenge with not doing AI is that really it's unstoppable. So apart from being super tempting and attractive to use as an end user, so those chat bots that or chat interfaces that I've already mentioned, I think it's as fundamental as things like railways and emails. And so if you think about, I just pulled some numbers on the proliferation of railway infrastructure and emails being sent. So you can see a massive uptick. In 1825, there were 100 kilometers of railway track. And by 1920, so not 100 years later, there were 1 million kilometers of railway track globally. That's a pretty rapid proliferation of anything. And you think about actually how hard that must have been to achieve. It's quite incredible, really. But even 100 or 200 years ago, we're talking about substantial exponential growth in a new technology. The same thing happened with email. You wouldn't hesitate now to use email, I assume anyway. And that went from relatively speaking small number in 1990, 100 million emails being sent every day, to in 2010 300 billion. And the estimation now, I think, that I didn't include on here, is that we're about 400 billion emails being sent every day. And I think AI is in the same sort of category as that. So if you try as a mere IT leader in an average organization to say, what, we're going to just hold off AI for a little while and be concerned about its impact on the planet, you're going to struggle, because it's just a juggernaut that is going to keep on driving forward. And if you don't jump on that bandwagon, then you will risk being left behind, and your company will be less competitive potentially, and you won't have all the benefits that are there. So Peter, if you can just go to the next slide. So I think rather than an exercise in how are there sustainable ways to do AI, I thought I'd just actually think to myself, how can I feel better about this? So I'm not going to stop using ChatGPT. I'm not going to stop using Claude and the other tools that I regularly use, but I do want to feel better about how the impact that AI is having and how sustainable AI is. So I sort of think I'm sort of forming up a bit of a framework and mantra for how to think about this, and it's got these 4 pillars. So the first is enjoy and moderation. So the use that you or your company makes in relative to the overall use of AI is pretty small. But actually, do you really need to generate the image on the right hand side here? I did agonize over slightly. It's generated by AI. Do you really need to generate that extra version of an image? Do you really need to have this chat with AI about where you should go for which pub you should go to tonight? Could you just use a conventional Google search? So or in your business, do you need to think about using AI for automating every process when actually conventional automation might work? So my first sort of mantra for using AI is enjoy in moderation, like all things really, I suppose. Then the second thing to think about is that actually AI, without you doing anything, without me doing anything, does already have a global benefit. So the existence of AI net is is potentially able to be seen as a good thing. So that report that I've got the link to underneath there is Climate Technology Progress Report, and it highlights areas where we're making significant progress. So the world is making significant progress in designing offshore wind farms and onshore wind farms and positioning solar so that we can get the maximum energy generation from those resources in a way that we couldn't do before we had AI. And so, the net benefit is positive for the world. I've called it local benefits, so that, just being the opposite of global. So actually, if you think about how you use AI yourself and how you're leading the use of AI in a business, you can focus first on the things that are going to make the business more efficient. And by more efficient, you can focus down on stuff that is going to reduce the energy consumption of the business overall. So, if you have to have fewer people sitting in front of laptops all day, if you have to have fewer trucks driving around, if you have to run your factory for fewer hours every day, then you're creating a net energy benefit. And if AI is helping you to do those things, then you can feel good that there's a net benefit to using AI. And then also in a sort of emerging way, you're obviously not going to get this by using ChatGPT currently, but there are choices you can make. So deploying large language models in greener data centers. There are data centers that run exclusively on renewable energy. There are data centers that are capturing heat and reusing it for use in the community. You can choose to adopt those or use those options when you're deploying AI to make the AI you're actually doing greener. A bit harder to do, but possible. So I sort of think it's this is an unfinished journey and a thought process that will continue to evolve, I think. But I have decided, as someone interested in sustainability, I'm still plowing into AI full bore because I think it's just such an exciting and useful technology. But using these four things, I'm sort of tempering my use of it and feeling all right about the sustainable aspects of it. And if you want to read any more, there's a very good report by Friends of the Earth that I've linked to under there as well, which talks about how they look at AI. Friends of the Earth being a large sort of green policy advocacy group globally. And their net outcome, they have 7 principles in that article. The net outcome of those principles is, do use AI. It does support, improvements in the climate and the environment. And so, if it's good enough for Friends of the Earth, then it's good enough for me. But I continue to evolve my thinking in this area, and hopefully, you guys can too as a result of some of this. So, thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you, Martin. I think it's really interesting and really good take on the AI side. As what we're going to do is just have a very brief question session now. If anyone's got any particular questions they want to ask now, and then we'll also have a main one right at the end. So I don't know whether anyone wants to jump in and ask a question at this stage at all.
I've got one, Peter.
Go on.
Well, I mean, I use ChatGPT, Martin, and increasingly more and more. And I'm just wondering, what is it? Why don't I just let this thing unfold? Why do I need to do something as an individual when this huge juggernaut of sort of AI is sort of moving along, and it's good? What impact can I have as an individual, do you think, versus just kind of letting the thing unfold? Because that's the thing I'm often thinking about.
Well, I think it's the same argument as why you bother to recycle your rubbish and separate your rubbish from recycling, and why you don't litter, why you drive politely and pleasantly on the road. It's because you're part of a community, and you, by doing your bit, you're contributing to an overall improvement in how things are done. And so, with AI, making personal choice not to pointlessly, wastefully generate images that you don't really need, or have conversations with AI you don't really need, you are dramatically reducing your own carbon footprint from using AI. And I think that's, I think as part of being sustainable in any sort of venture in your life, the same thing applies in AI.
Yes, yeah, okay. So it's more about choice in some ways. Being conscious.
Yes,
you have a
making
choice.
conscious choices. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone's just asked actually in the chat whether people come off mute to ask a question or just ask it here. So I don't know whether people can unmute themselves. So if you find you can't, then I guess just put the question in chat, and we'll either address it now or in the Q&A at the end.
Great. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm just conscious of time. So if we just jump on to the next section, which is sustainability starts from within. And the floor's over to you, Darren.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm coming at this from a different perspective to Martin, although I think actually linked. And it's kind of, I guess, recognizing, when I go into organizations, typically what we're talking about is performance. It's about performance of the MD, performance of their leadership team. It's like getting a better sense of self-awareness about how they are experienced in the organization, and then focusing on the bits that actually really matter, to do whatever they want within the business, whatever goals they have, or whatever strategy they're trying to execute. And at the same time, what I've recognized recently is that often if I go for lunch, for example, with the MD, we might get onto the subject of, the environment, stuff like that that's going on. I've got an example recently where I'm meeting an MD of a managed service provider. He's actually a friend of mine. I've known him for 15 years. And, it's an interesting thing for me. And we got onto the subject of it. He's like, Darren, we just don't have the time. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a really interesting sort of dilemma for this area. Peter, can you just move the slide along a moment? Which is recognizing that in the tech sector, it's always been fast and competitive. I would argue it's getting increasingly complex, but with more complex, particularly AI innovations that are coming up, and that with that, the tech industry has a massive opportunity to impact how we go about becoming more sustainable. But what I'm experiencing when I have these conversations is it's much more a nice to have than a must have. Growth is important, the team performing and us beating the competition. That remains the sort of priority, and it is important, because otherwise we go out of business and we can't make any money. But what I'm sort of recognizing is that perhaps in order to shift the conversation and start to move us to accelerate, a bit like AI is at the moment, accelerate our move to more sustainability, recognizing that we have planetary limits. I mean, you can argue about the environmental crisis or not. We're reaching planetary limits. And so perhaps it's not about more data or strategy about how we do it, because we've got all of that stuff. Actually, it might be about us, as humans, about how we're sort of thinking about this. And that got my interest in terms of, so how can I have the conversation with people about this, but still, maintain the sort of intentions that the people I work with have about their businesses, the stuff that's important to them. And I found this quote, which is actually 12 years old, from a chap called Gus Speth. He's an American environmental lawyer. And I'll just read it to you, because I thought, 12 years ago, he pretty much captured what I'm seeing at the moment. And he said, I used to think the top global environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. And so I just wanted to leave that with you for a few seconds, just to notice the focus we all have on this sort of existential threat we have, and how we're going about it. And actually, the question I have is, are we actually looking inside as one of the aspects of how we kind of deal with what we're dealing with on a sort of macro level and micro level, in terms of what we do on a daily basis, a bit like Martin described. So what that led me to do is to say, is to sort of do a bit of research around, what's being done, because I know there's lots of things being done, but what practically can we actually do? So I actually got pointed to the UN. So Peter, can you just move the? I got pointed to the UN, and what the UN did back in 2005 was they created 17 sustainable development goals. And it's not just about, environmental development or sustainability. It's also about inequality. So there's 17 sort of aspects that if we pay some attention to, we could live in a much nicer world that's more sustainable for all of us into the future. And so that was interesting. That was the first step. So they actually created a framework around that 20 years ago, so that was the first step, sort of not 20 years ago, sort of 10 years ago, 2015. And that was the 193 member states of the UN. So 10 years ago, they put a framework together about where we could focus. So that was interesting. What was more interesting to me as a sort of human developer, if you like, was that in 2020, they actually looked at, so what does that mean for us as humans? How do we need to start thinking, behaving, being as humans in order to enable us to make some progress towards those sustainable development goals? And what they came up with, based on a huge amount of research, were 5 key inner development goals. And those inner development goals, if focused on, would allow us, the research says, would allow us to start moving towards the goals we set for sustainability. And you'll see them on the screen there. There's being, so our relationship to self, how self-aware we are, thinking, cognitively, how are we dealing with complexity, what level of critical thinking do we bring, relating, do we care for others or not? Do we care for the environment or not? Collaborating, how well are we co-creating, coming up with ideas, thinking about the future? That's what we do as humans really well, that AI doesn't do so well, is that we can actually create in our mind's eye what the future could look like. And acting, driving change with courage and creativity. So, they came up with these, and you'll see there's 23 subcategories of focus in order to achieve a good level of development in each of those areas. And so I'm sure the question in your mind at the moment is that's great, Darren. I've seen these before. There's a million airport books about personal development in the airport I could pick up, and it'll probably say the same thing. And I would acknowledge that. There are, although I would argue that this is all open source. It's available. If you go onto the UN website, you'll find these things, and you'll be able to see what they mean in detail. But one of the things that I sort of thought about this is that, in many ways, these aren't just soft skills, that are nice to have. They're actually survival skills. If you think about the complexity we're facing as a species, not wanting to be too over the top, but, it's going to take a different level of thinking in order to get to the sort of ideas that we need. That level of thinking isn't going to just happen by itself. We need to accelerate it a bit like we are with AI. And I think the interesting thing about this is if we focus on these things, it's not just about sustainability. It's actually about, leaders being more adaptive to the complexities they're facing, be it AI, more competition, global shifts. We can be more adaptive rather than reactive. We're likely to create collaborative cultures in our organizations rather than sort of internal competition. And hopefully we'll start to become more sort of purpose driven. We've got an idea about how we think the future could be, how we can impact the future from a sustainable perspective. So the decisions we make they're made less about how can I beat the competition, more about, how am I going to be part of the solution for the sustainable world that, hopefully we're all going to experience into the future. But the question I'm then faced with is, so why aren't we doing it? You know what I mean? It's like, well, if this is so obvious, if this is open source, it's on the UN Sustainable Development Goals website, we can get hold of it. Why aren't we doing it? And then it comes back to, so what are the blockers? And the things that, if I look at the conversations I'm having with people, not enough time, too busy, because we're all pretty busy with everything these days. It's not measurable. How do I measure whether I'm making any progress with these things? And we're not in the business of personal development. Our business is providing managed services for our solicitor clients or whatever. And my argument is that actually, it's not that. Those things, yeah, they're real, but they're not the real things. The real things are that we don't we don't have the self-awareness about the mindset gaps that are holding us back, if you like, the beliefs potentially that are holding us back. And if we could just unlock those and identify those blockers, then maybe we can make some we can think differently, we can create different ideas, we can think differently about how we go about becoming more sustainable. Peter, can you just move the slide along, please? And so one of the answers to this, and I sort of came about this, I'm qualified in something called the Leadership Circle Profile. It's an instrument, many instruments out there. But what it does really uniquely is and this is the link between, the busyness of the IT industry, focus on, the things that we're focused on, the inner development goals that we need to focus some attention to in order to create the future we want. And so how do we measure it? How do I get a sense of how I'm thinking? And that's what the Leadership Circle Profile does. It's a 360-degree profiling tool that allows us to check in on how we think we're thinking, and also on how other people, our key stakeholders, think we're thinking. And what's interesting about it, and this isn't by design, but what's interesting about it is it shows our sort of what they call reactive tendencies. So the things that might be holding us back, like, am I too keen to control things, or am I so driven that I'm not even interested in anything else? Or, do I want to belong to the team so much that I don't want to have the sort of the difficult conversations? So you get a sense of that, what might be holding you back. And also it gives you a sense of what you're doing well. Where are your strengths? Where are my so my creative competencies, how well I'm thinking about the system outside of my organization, how well am I relating to the people in the organization and perhaps the community around them? Am I able to have those courageous conversations so that we can actually raise this in the boardroom? What are we doing about sustainability? What are we actually doing? And so I won't go into all of them, but what those creative competencies in the Leadership Circle Profile do is they align directly with the inner development goals of the UN. Which is it is amazing, really, if you think about it, because it's not by design. And at the same time, if you think about all those airport books, a lot of this stuff we know about. It's just a question of how do I get a sense from myself about how I'm thinking about the world, how I'm thinking about my organization, how I'm behaving as a leader, and how I can connect those patterns of thought, those patterns of action with habits of thought. And that's what the Leadership Circle Profile provides us. It provides us a real insight, that self-awareness that might be holding us back, that we're not even conscious of. Peter, can you move that along? Thanks. So my thought from all of this, trying to, if you like, navigate through, we're so busy maintaining our businesses, there's no room for sustainability. My conclusion from all of this research is that actually there is a way through this. The first thing we need to do is identify what we're not thinking about. What areas could we develop more? What are we doing well, but what areas could we develop more about that might be holding us back from thinking more sustainably about things? It could be like, I need to become more aware of the systems around me, so I can then reveal where the development's needed, so I can get really focused, and I can then put together, a sort of development path that is meaningful. It's not just another psychometric that tells me, I'm good at building team relationships. Okay, that's important, but how does it relate to the bigger picture? And what that will allow, based on the work that I do with the LCP, is that people who use it tend to become more purpose driven. They get a sense of themselves and they go, actually, I'm making decisions because it's important to me. I get a sense of my values, what's important to me, and I'm able to have different sort of conversations in the organization that maybe I wouldn't have had before. I'm recognizing that I sort of hold back from these courageous conversations. And ultimately, I think what this could provide for us, if we were all to see how important it is for us in organizations, and that's tech organizations, but any organizations really, is how do we balance the polarity of performance and sustainability? Does it have to be an either or can it be an and? Can we perform within the organization, meet all the targets we have, and do it sustainably? And I guess my argument for this, if you like, my thesis for this, is that yes, we can. And it's not just another airport book that we read and forget. It's actually It's looking at the things that matter based on a huge amount of research by the UN and actually measuring those things. You get a sense of how you're responding to those things, and then you can put a plan in place to meet all of those 23 subcategories of the UN Inner Development Goals. And then who knows what's possible after that. We then could make some real shifts to a more creative future that enables a more sustainable planet and living environment for all of us. Is there another? I can't remember. Is there another slide? Yeah. So my final slide with this is really, it starts with insight. You can't do anything unless you've got the data, can you? So let's get the insight, get a sense of how you're responding to situations and a sense of what's important to yourself. Then through that, build the capacity to do things differently, and know that when you're taking action, you're taking it from a different place. You're taking it from the inside out rather than, the business plan that you've created that may be very sort of financially or performance driven. Does anybody have any questions about that? What comes up for anyone?
I'll tell you what, Darren, I definitely have a question for you.
Go for it.
Which is, I always wrestle, which is how do your inner development goals relate to your key business goals? Because actually business is about growth and profit. That's all that generally business needs to care about, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I would say that I would say traditionally, yes. And also, given we live in the system we live in, yes. We're nowhere if you don't have a profitable business. And at the same time, I would argue there is capacity and capability to think differently, and it's how do we enable us to think differently? You know what it's like when the pressure's on, we tend to sort of become a bit more narrow-minded, narrow focus on what you know. And what I'm arguing is actually at a time when the pressure's on, we need to step back, when you think more broadly. And the knock-on effect is that all of those things that you're focusing on will enable a profitable business anyway. It's not an either or. By focusing on the inner development goals and getting a sense of it from the LCP, you're more likely to have a sustainable and profitable business than if you don't. So it's it's an and. You don't lose. It's more the sort of lens that you're looking through, and that additional sort of lens is that actually there's a sustainability element here that we may not be recognizing. Thanks, Peter. That's all.
Fantastic, thank you. Guys, I can't see any of the questions coming in just because of the way that Zoom appears on my screen. Is there anything come through that we need to go through?
Currently in the chat, Peter. No questions currently. I can see the chat window. There's nothing else in here.
Okay, fantastic. So if we could move into our final section here. So from idea to action. So this is, it could be a call to action. I just wanted to sort of chat through the whole concept about sustainable IT. So first of all, I think it'd be best for me to define it. So the definition, certainly for the purpose of this discussion, is about sustainable IT involves the designing, manufacturing, using, for most people, just the using and disposing of your IT infrastructure with minimal environmental impact. That's all it is. Then there are some thoughts about that, which is currently most IT departments are not measured by their sustainability criteria, but many businesses now have sustainability goals, and also energy consumption has become a hot topic. So those are some of the reasons. But if you look at actual research, so Gartner, for example, they say that this is globally, and they say by 2027, 25% of chief information officer compensation is going to be tied to the impact of sustainable technology. So it would seem to be pretty clear that it's something that's coming down the track, a little bit like Martin's talking about AI. You can't really ignore it. You can't resist it. It's something that's coming down the track, and it's something that you're going to have to get involved in at some stage. So where Gartner again see that sustainable technology fits, they actually see that the sustainable technology fits right in the middle of pretty well everything. So this is their top strategic tech trends for 2024. So if anyone wanted to read through this, it's on the Gartner website, and it does make some quite interesting value, interesting reading, and it gives some really good value to the discussion. So I don't think there's any point in necessarily going through each of those aspects, but it's just trying to give a general idea and thought that sustainable technology is at the heart of technology. It's not like a sort of sitting on the outside outlying sort of thing that you may or may not have to do. Certainly, from Gartner's perspective, and they're an exceedingly well-respected research body, they see it sitting right in the middle. Okay, so let's just explore this in a little bit more depth. So first of all, I'm going to go through some of the risks, because there are risks of going through sustainable IT route, and some of those are performance trade-offs. The IT department, it's there to keep the lights on, keep kit running, isn't it? And you can end up focusing on sustainability, and you could end up having issues with speed, resilience, reliability, and security. Obviously, there's ways to get around those risks, but nonetheless, if you purely focused on sustainability and you didn't focus on the other aspects of it, you can end up with performance trade-offs. Oh, hang on, I think, is it just lost it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Great. Where's it gone? Sorry, just a second, guys. I'm just going to stop that share for a second.
You should be able to start it up again.
Yes, I'll just end up with a completely blank screen. I've never had this one before.
Ah, okay.
Just keep
gonna
talking it
try
through. So,
Hmm?
just keep talking. So,
Yeah.
just keep...
So hang on, I'm just yeah. So basically, there are risks of going down a sustainable technology routes path, and those are. Hang on, I'm just going to end this. Right, let's just.
Peter, if you keep talking, I've got the slides here. I'll put them up. Just give me a second.
There we go. Has it just come up again?
No.
Oh, fantastic.
Sorry about this, but the slides will be available within about a week.
Yeah. And I've got them. So Peter, if you carry on, I know it's harder to do, but if you carry on, I will beam them up shortly so we can.
Fantastic. So some of the risks are here. Hang on. How embarrassing. Never mind.
I'll take this into the kitchen because the thing is live, so they'll hear me. So if I go in the kitchen, that will be all right. Okay.
Martin, can you?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
I'll be there. 2 seconds.
I should just carry on talking.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so some of the risks are performance trade-offs. We can have you can end up with issues of speed, resilience, reliability, and security. You can end up with a vendor lock-in. So you can end up having some, your sustainability features might tie you to specific platforms or providers. You can also have a resistance to change within the business as well. So, you can quite often find that some of the key stakeholders and users might actually be resistant to change within the business. And then the final risk can be actually greenwashing. And I always worry about greenwashing because I think it's important not to call out people who are trying to do something from a green perspective, but you know, and I think it's really important not to try and call them out on it. But nonetheless, you know, it is important to steer away from greenwashing and making sure that anything that you say that you are doing, you are actually doing. So that's some of the risks. There's also risks of no action, and those can be down to generally, I mean, it's not exclusive to this, but there's a number of different areas of risks of no action. So they can be down to regulatory non-compliance. You can have reputational damage. If you don't take any action, you can also have a reduced competitive advantage. And last but not least, you can also miss some innovation opportunities within there. So there's risks of no action as well as risks of action. Martin, those slides up yet, by the way?
Yep. Hopefully you can see.
Fantastic. So that's the risks of no action. And then if we go on to the benefits of taking action, so there's a number of benefits of taking action. Those being it can help you to lower resource consumption and less e-waste. It can really help you streamline your technology services. So it's going down the sustainable IT route is a really good way to focus on your technology as a whole, and it's interesting when you actually focus on the technology as a whole, you can often find that there's a lot of things that where you streamline them, you actually benefit. So actually you end up reducing the amount of what you have, but you're concentrating on making sure that what you do have is really delivering what you need it to do. There's reputational and strategic benefits of taking action. And last but not least, it also showcases IT at the forefront. And I think this is great because I think often IT is left right at the background, and it's just a function of the business or function within the business. But actually, if you go down the sustainable IT route, you can actually showcase IT at the forefront of technology. And then last but not least, it's ultimately, it is a strategic necessity, and it's an ethical obligation. And ultimately, we really see that, or I certainly see that the benefits of going down a sustainable IT route, really the benefits outweigh the risks when approached with a clear strategy. And so ultimately, that's the way that we see it as an organisation. That covers that section. So let's well, if we move into questions and answers, and Martin, if you go to the very last slide for a second, so it has all of our contact details on there.
Yep. Got it, Peter.
So fantastic. So yes, I mean each of us are here and reach out for us, but has anyone got any questions? And has anything come through on the chat at all?
I'm not seeing anything on the chat. No, we've got question coming from Scott. How much of this environmental sustainability focus is a form of greenwashing? Organisations talk about becoming more sustainable, but when the gloves come off and you look at business decisions, the drive for more profit usually and exclusively trumps everything else. How do we change that mindset and behaviour?
I left.
I'd like to pick that up. Thanks, Scott. That's a great question.
Should we answer that? Come at that question from our different perspectives, Martin.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Kick off. Shall I kick off? I mean, really Scott, I think it's a great question, and probably the, probably the key. It's like the keystone of all of this stuff. From my perspective, I would argue it's about it's changing how we're thinking, changing who we are in many ways, which will then influence what we do. It's about what we value. It's about what's important to us. It's about identifying beliefs and assumptions that maybe we have that we don't even realize we have that are getting in the way of us making changes. Because yes, we have to maintain profitability, we have to be competitive, we have to grow. They're all a given, and at the same time, you know, as I said earlier, we've got a planetary issue, and we've got limits that we're reaching, and unless we change how we think about these things and how we feel about them, nothing's going to change, because the business as usual is too strong, and that's why, from my perspective, it's like we need the data about ourselves. How are we actually thinking about this before we can actually say, right, how do I want to think differently? And then it's a question of, you know, development. Really, it's a question of going along a development path to enable us to do that. And that may be unpicking beliefs that we have that are quite entrenched.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And I think just to add to that, and to, you know, perhaps give us a slightly different spin, I just think there are lots of opportunities, increasingly more opportunities to align sustainable goals and profitability. So, for example, you know, it's kind of a ship that's already sailed now, but, you know, using sustainable renewable energy is often cheaper at the point of use for a company than using classic fossil fuels. And so you can, you know, that's one example. I think there are an increasing number of examples where you can have both, and certainly I'm pursuing that, you know, wherever I can.
Brilliant.
Lisa, do you have anything you want to add on that question?
And I was just going to add something from actually taking the path to sustainable IT, which is, it depends on how you take the path, which is, if you just turn around and say, right, well, we're going to take the sustainable IT route, and we're going to be sustainable, and we'll turn a couple of things off. You could be accused of being of greenwashing, but if you actually go down a clear, defined path to sustainable IT, and you look into what you're doing, and then take that path and act on what you're doing and continue down that path, someone can't really accuse you of greenwashing, because you're actually physically doing something about it. So I would definitely say, as long as you embark on the path and continue on the path, then it's a great way to go. You know, and taking that sustainable IT path, it gives so many benefits. You actually end up saving money rather than costing money in most scenarios. So yeah.
I think that's true. I'm not seeing any other questions currently coming through on the chat, so I'd just pick up the point. I guess if I was, you know, if I think about what's motivated Scott to write that question, and you know, not to put words in your mouth, Scott, but you know, I would think there are lots of companies who aren't doing this and who are not, you know, going down that path yet, Peter. And I think there is a role for government to play and a role for regulation to play to, you know, increase the cost of using carbon, increase the cost of not being sustainable for the whole economy, so that it drives companies and businesses to take decisions that are, you know, in the interest of profit, but are also sustainable. You know, decisions that make them more sustainable.
Yeah.
You see Clifton's got his hand up, Martin.
Oh yeah, Clifton, feel free to unmute if you can.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think so. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, can do. Yeah.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you very much for this presentation. It was wonderful. And the reason I joined this is because I'm pretty new to BCS, and I'm also a member of the Green Software Foundation. I volunteer with them. I basically do some talks at some universities over here in the US. So I was wondering whether you all have any association with Green Software Foundation, because they do a lot on sustainable software, especially from the software perspective, right? They have tools, they have methodologies, and I think the SCI is also now an ISO standard. So is there any association with Green Software Foundation? Because there are ways to basically measure your software, your carbon footprint and the emissions basically from software. So they talk about several different things. I can keep going on, but I'll be hijacking this meeting, which I do not want to. But they do a lot. I mean,
yeah. No, thanks, Clifton. So we three, you know, the Sustainability Professionals Partnership, we're not currently associated with the Green Software Foundation, but BCS maybe, I don't know for sure, but it definitely sounds like an interesting organisation, and I'll check them out.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Clifton.
Sure.
Helpful.
Any other questions coming from the floor?
And then Martin, do you want to just nip back to a couple of slides, because there was we put a load of bodies in there that people can go through. So this first one here is just a number of governance and worldwide bodies. If you want to do a bit of reading, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a few that you can go through and read about. If you pop onto the next one, Martin.
Yep.
Then these are a number on IT specific. So there's Techie Goes Green, Infrastructure Nations, SDIA, which is the European, and obviously clearly BCS as well. And then there's one other one after that as well, if you can do, Martin, I believe.
There we go.
And this is just a number of professional standards, just to really wrap up. So when you get the slides through, these will be there. Again, they're not exhaustive lists, but they're just a number of standards that you can look into if you want to. So either you've got the ISOs, you've got ITIL, you've got a BSI and a whole number of different ones. But the main ones on professional standards tend to be the ISO, BSI, and ITIL. But there are, of course, others out there. So, good. Okay. Well, I think we're 14:58, so I think we're literally 2 minutes to the end. So, I mean, first of all, I want to apologise of me trying to drive Zoom. Unfortunately, I'm a bit of a Microsoft Teams man myself, so I'm not sure whether it was me or whether it was a general technical glitch. But certainly, if it was something that I did there, apologies that we slightly lost the slides part of the way through.
But just before we finish, then what I'd like to do is to thank the three of you. It was fantastic. It really was. To let everybody know that the slides will be available on the website in about a week. Thank you very much. And the video, probably about 3 weeks it takes. But because you registered, you will be sent an email from the BCS telling you the link to the video anyway. But you can go onto the website. And something actually I'd like to ask you is if there is possibility of a follow-up session.
Yeah, I'm up for it.
Yes.
Peter?
Yes, certainly, potentially. We talked about this, potentially being some form of mini series. So we're certainly going to look into that. Being honest, we haven't developed that yet. But something that Darren and Martin and myself we've sort of briefly spoken about. So I think I'd say highly likely that we'll have a follow-up session. So please watch this space and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. Thanks for the opportunity.
And if anybody would like to contact you, I believe that if they're just talking about for a chat, there is no cost. Is that correct?
No.
Yeah, talk is free.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well, from all of us, please feel free to contact us. And certainly, I'm if there's any cost involved, I think we're all going to be upfront about whether there is. So just make contact. Let's have a chat. Yeah, as I say, talk is free, so we can have a chat, and and then if there is something we need to do to follow up from there that's costed, well, we're going to talk about that beforehand, and then we can have a chat and see if it's something you want to do and go from there.
I think this is wonderful. It's been very amazing points that you've raised through this, and this is very much sustainability. And and also, in fact, AI is now a very key topic. So we're very, very grateful to all three of you. And I think everybody would like to, if you show appreciation, I know there's been various thank yous I've seen in the chat, but otherwise, if people would like to go to reactions, so we can clap hands, or alternatively, say thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Margaret.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.